The sleek black Range Rover sat idling in the private courtyard of Clarence's house, its engine humming softly in the crisp London morning. Inside the vehicle, something waited, something that would shatter the carefully constructed peace within the royal family. Prince William's hands trembled slightly as he held his phone, staring at the message that had arrived just minutes ago from the head of palace security. 3 words changed everything. "You need to see this." What the royal guards had discovered during a routine security sweep wasn't just shocking. It was evidence that someone within the family had been hiding secrets that could damage the monarchy itself. As William's car pulled up to confront his stepmother, Queen Camilla, he had no idea that this morning would force him to choose between protecting his father's happiness and exposing a truth that the palace had worked years to bury. The morning had started like any other Tuesday at Clarence's house. Queen Camilla had scheduled a private appointment in central London. Something about meeting with charity organizers for one of her literacy programs. Her personal protection officers had performed their standard security check on her vehicle, a routine that had become second nature after decades of royal protocol. But this time, something was different. Detective Chief Inspector James Rothwell had been with Royal Protection for 17 years. He had seen everything from suspicious packages to overzealous photographers, but nothing had prepared him for what his junior officer discovered tucked beneath the passenger seat of Queen Camilla's Range Rover. It was a leather document folder, expensive and discreet, the kind that important people used to carry sensitive papers. When Officer Sarah Chen pulled it out during the sweep, she expected to find charity documents or perhaps personal correspondence. Instead, she found something that made her blood run cold. Inside the folder were photographs, dozens of them. Some were old, dating back to the early 90s, showing private moments that no camera should have captured. Others were recent, printed on high-quality photo paper. But it wasn't just the images themselves that raised alarm bells. It was what they represented. There were pictures of Princess Diana taken during her most vulnerable moments. There were documents with handwritten notes in the margins detailing private conversations and personal struggles. Most disturbing were the recent photographs of Prince William and his children, taken from angles that suggested they had been captured without permission, possibly from inside palace grounds. Detective Rothwell made the decision immediately. He sealed the folder in an evidence bag and placed a direct call to Prince William's private secretary. This wasn't something that could go through normal channels. This required immediate attention from the heir to the throne himself. Within 20 minutes, William was being briefed in a secure room at Kensington Palace. His face remained calm as he listened, a skill he had learned from years of royal training, but inside, his mind raced with questions and a growing sense of betrayal. The evidence suggested something troubling. Either someone had planted these materials in Camilla's car to frame her, or she had been keeping these items for reasons that needed immediate explanation. William thought about his father, King Charles, who had finally found happiness after years of scandal and public scrutiny. He thought about his own children, whose images were among those in the folder. Most painfully, he thought about his mother, and the photos that showed her in moments of private anguish. William asked to see everything. As he carefully examined each item, wearing the white gloves that Rothwell provided, he felt a complex mix of emotions. There were pictures of Diana crying in her car, clearly taken by someone close enough to breach security. There were copies of personal letters, some in Diana's own handwriting, that had never been made public. The presence of these items in Camilla's possession raised questions that William couldn't ignore. No matter how much he might want to protect his father's peace of mind, the newer photographs were equally concerning. Images of George, Charlotte, and Louis playing in private areas of their home. Pictures of William and Catherine during what should have been private family moments. Someone had been watching them, documenting them, keeping records of their lives in ways that went far beyond normal security protocols or press coverage. The thought made William's stomach turn. His children's safety was paramount, and this collection suggested a level of surveillance that was both illegal and deeply disturbing. William made several calls. First to his private secretary, instructing him to clear his morning schedule without explanation. Second, to his security team, ordering a complete sweep of all family residences. Third, to his wife Catherine, warning her to keep the children inside and away from windows until further notice. Finally, he called his brother Harry, despite the years of distance between them. Whatever was happening, it affected the entire family, and Harry deserved to know. The decision to confront Camilla directly was not made lightly. William considered going through official channels, perhaps having palace security handle the matter discreetly. But the nature of the evidence and the potential implications for the monarchy demanded a more personal approach. This wasn't just about protocol or public image. This was about trust, family, and the memory of his mother. William needed to look Camilla in the eye and hear her explanation directly. As he prepared for the confrontation, William reflected on his relationship with his stepmother. It had never been easy. For years, she represented the woman who had caused his parents' marriage to crumble. As an adult, he had tried to build bridges for his father's sake, attending family dinners, including her in official events, teaching his children to show her respect. But there had always been a distance, an unspoken boundary that neither of them fully crossed. Now, that careful détente was about to be tested in ways William never imagined. The drive to Clarence House took less than 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. William sat in the back of his security vehicle, the sealed evidence folder on the seat beside him. Detective Rothwell had offered to accompany him, but William declined. This needed to be handled within the family first. If criminal charges needed to be filed later, so be it. But this initial conversation would happen between stepmother and stepson, away from official procedures and legal protocols. Clarence House staff were notified of his arrival just minutes before he walked through the doors. Surprised looks on their faces told him that this unexpected visit was causing quite a stir. William was directed to the morning room, where Camilla often took her tea. She wasn't there yet, giving him a moment to collect his thoughts and prepare for what would surely be one of the most difficult conversations of his life. When Camilla entered the room, she was smiling, clearly pleased by the unexpected visit from her stepson. That smile faltered when she saw his expression. William didn't sit down. He didn't accept the tea that she offered. Instead, he placed the evidence folder on the antique table between them and asked a single question that would change everything. "Can you explain why these were found in your car?" Camilla's face went pale as she looked at the folder. For a moment, she seemed frozen, as if trying to decide how to respond. Her hands, usually so steady during public appearances, trembled slightly as she reached toward the evidence bag. William watched her carefully, trying to read every micro-expression, every subtle shift in her demeanor. He had been trained to observe people, to detect deception, and he used every bit of that training now. What happened next would determine not just the fate of their relationship, but potentially the future of the monarchy itself. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the ticking of an ornate clock on the mantelpiece. Outside, London continued its bustling morning routine. Unaware that inside these historic walls, a confrontation was unfolding that could expose secrets the royal family had worked decades to protect. William waited for her answer, knowing that nothing would ever be quite the same again. Regardless of what explanation she might offer, Camilla's hand hovered over the evidence folder for what felt like an eternity. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Where exactly did they find this?" William noticed she didn't deny knowing what was inside. She didn't express shock or confusion. Instead, her question suggested familiarity with the contents, which only deepened his concern. William remained standing, his posture rigid with controlled tension. "Beneath the passenger seat of your Range Rover, during a routine security sweep this morning, my protection officers found it and immediately contacted me." He paused, watching her reaction carefully. "I need you to tell me why you have photographs of my mother in her most private moments. I need you to explain why there are recent images of my children in places where no photographer should have access." Camilla moved slowly to the sofa and sat down, her usual composure cracking under the weight of the moment. She looked older. Suddenly, the carefully maintained public image falling away to reveal someone who appeared genuinely troubled. "It's not what you think, William," she began, but he raised his hand to stop her. "Then tell me what it is. Because right now it looks like you've been keeping some kind of surveillance record of my family. It looks like you've had access to private photographs of my mother that should never have existed in the first place. So please help me understand, because the alternative explanations are all quite disturbing. Camilla took a deep breath, seeming to gather her thoughts. When she spoke again, her words came slowly, as if she were carefully choosing each one. Those photographs and documents were given to me years ago, not recently. They came into my possession during a very difficult time. When the press was relentless and accusations were flying from every direction, someone thought I should know what was being said, what evidence existed, what might eventually be used against me or your father. William's jaw tightened. That doesn't explain the recent photographs of my children. Those couldn't have been given to you years ago. George is only 10 years old. No, you're right, Camilla admitted, her eyes meeting his. Those are different. Those were brought to me by someone concerned about your security. There have been breaches, William. Someone has been taking photographs from inside palace grounds, selling them to tabloids or worse, keeping them for purposes we don't understand. I've been trying to track down who's responsible before bringing it to official attention. The explanation sounded plausible, but William wasn't satisfied. And you didn't think to inform me? My children's safety is involved, and you decided to conduct your own private investigation rather than alert security services or, at the very least, inform their father. Camilla stood up, some of her usual strength returning to her voice. I was trying to protect you. And your father. Charles has been through so much, and I didn't want to alarm him with threats that might turn out to be nothing. I thought if I could identify the source quietly, we could handle it without creating another media circus. William walked to the window. Looking out at the manicured gardens of Clarence House, his mind was processing multiple scenarios simultaneously. Either Camilla was telling the truth and had made a misguided attempt to handle a security breach on her own, or she was lying, and these materials served some other purpose he hadn't yet uncovered. Neither option was particularly comforting. Tell me about the photographs of my mother, he said, his back still turned to her. Why would anyone give those to you? And more importantly, why would you keep them all these years? The silence that followed his questions stretched uncomfortably. When Camilla finally answered, there was a note of something in her voice that William couldn't quite identify. Regret, perhaps? Or guilt. Because they showed me what I had helped to cause. The pain, the isolation, the desperation. I kept them as a reminder of the cost of my actions. I'm not proud of it, William, but I couldn't simply throw them away. They felt like evidence of something I needed to remember. William turned to face her, his expression unreadable. That's either remarkably honest or a very convenient explanation now that you've been caught with them. I deserve your skepticism, Camilla acknowledged. I know our history. I know you've only accepted me for your father's sake, but I'm telling you the truth. Those old photographs were given to me by someone who wanted me to understand the full scope of what was happening in the early 90s. They wanted me to see what the press coverage and public scrutiny were doing to Diana. Who gave them to you? William demanded. I need a name. Camilla hesitated. And in that hesitation, William sensed there was more to the story than she was revealing. I can't tell you that. I made a promise, and despite everything, I keep my promises. Even when those promises potentially put my children at risk? William's voice rose slightly, the first crack in his controlled demeanor. Even when it means withholding information from a security investigation. The person who gave me those old photographs is dead, Camilla said quietly. Has been for years. So that secret dies with them and me. But the recent photographs are different. I can help with that investigation. I have notes, contacts, theories about who might be responsible. William returned to the table and carefully opened the evidence folder, removing one of the recent photographs. It showed Charlotte playing in what should have been a secure area of Kensington Palace. The angle suggested the photographer had been relatively close, possibly using telephoto lens from an adjacent building or perhaps from inside the grounds themselves. The thought made his blood run cold. This was taken 3 weeks ago, William said, pointing to the image. How long have you been collecting these? About 6 months, Camilla replied. The first one came to me anonymously, sent to my private office. Then more arrived, always anonymously, always showing your family in supposedly secure locations. I hired a private investigator to look into it. Someone outside official channels who could operate discreetly. You hired a private investigator to look into my family's security without informing. Anyone in the official security apparatus? William's voice was dangerously quiet now. Do you understand how that looks? Do you understand the protocols you violated? Camilla met his gaze steadily. I understand that I made decisions you don't approve of. But I also understand that there are people within the official channels who can't be trusted. Someone is leaking information, William. Someone with inside access. Going through proper channels might have alerted whoever is responsible. This revelation shifted something in William's thinking. If Camilla was telling the truth about a mole within the security services, her unorthodox approach might have been necessary, even if it was improperly executed. But could he trust her? Could he believe that her motives were protective rather than something darker? I want everything, William said finally. Every photograph, every document, every note from your private investigator. I want names, dates, theories, all of it. And then we're going to sit down with the head of Royal Protection and the Metropolitan Police, and you're going to explain all of this to them as well. And your father, Camilla asked quietly. Are you going to tell Charles about this? William considered the question carefully. His father's health had been a concern lately, and the stress of this situation could take a toll. But keeping secrets from the king was not an option, especially when those secrets involved potential security breaches and family safety. He needs to know. But I'll tell him myself, in my own way. He'll be devastated, Camilla said softly. Not by the security concerns, but by the wedge this will drive between us all. We've worked so hard to build something resembling a normal family. Normal families don't keep files of surveillance photographs hidden in their cars, William replied sharply. Normal families don't conduct secret investigations into each other's security. We stopped being a normal family the moment we were born into this institution. Camilla flinched at his words but didn't argue. Instead, she moved to a small writing desk in the corner of the room and retrieved a locked box from one of the drawers. She brought it to the table and opened it with a key she wore on a chain around her neck. Inside were more documents, more photographs, and several notebooks filled with handwritten observations. This is everything, she said, placing the box next to the evidence folder. The investigator's name is Marcus Webb. He's former MI5, very discreet, very thorough. He's been tracking patterns, trying to identify who might have both the access and the motive to photograph your family. William began looking through the materials, his expression growing darker with each page he turned. The scope of the surveillance was more extensive than he had initially realized. There were photographs of Catherine shopping, of him at private meetings, of his grandmother before her death. Someone had been documenting the royal family's private lives with disturbing thoroughness. Has Webb identified any suspects? William asked, not looking up from the documents. 3 possibilities, Camilla replied. All people with some level of security clearance and access to palace grounds, but no definitive proof yet. He was close to confirming the most likely suspect when these photographs were discovered in my car. Then we need to bring him in immediately, William said. Along with everything he's gathered, this stops being your private investigation right now and becomes an official security matter, agreed, Camilla said simply. I'll contact him today and arrange a meeting. William, I know you don't trust me. I know our history makes everything I say seem suspicious. But I swear to you, my only goal in this has been protecting this family, protecting your children. Whatever you believe about my past, please believe that I would never deliberately put them at risk. William looked at her for a long moment, trying to reconcile the woman standing before him with the person who had been vilified for so many years. She had caused his mother immense pain, had played a role in the destruction of his parents' marriage. But she was also the woman his father loved, the person who had stood by Charles through scandal and public disgrace. The complexity of the situation wasn't lost on him. I'm going to verify everything you've told me, William said finally. Every detail will be checked, every claim investigated. If I find out you've lied about any of this, if these materials serve some other purpose than what you've described, there will be consequences. I don't care if you're married to the king. I will not allow anything or anyone to threaten my children's safety. I wouldn't expect anything less, Camilla replied. You're your mother's son in that regard. She was fierce when it came to protecting you and Harry. It's one of the things I actually admired about her, even when we were enemies. The mention of Diana hung in the air between them, a ghost that never quite left the room in any conversation between William and Camilla. So much pain, so much history, so many things that could never be unsaid or undone. And now this new crisis that forced them into an uncomfortable alliance, at least temporarily. William gathered the evidence folder and the additional materials from the locked box. I'll have security come collect the rest. Don't leave London. Don't discuss this with anyone except my father. And even then, let me talk to him first. We're going to get to the bottom of this, Camilla. One way or another, we're going to find out who's behind these photographs and why they ended up in your possession. As William turned to leave, Camilla spoke once more. William, wait. There's something else you should know. Something about those old photographs of your mother. The person who gave them to me also gave me a letter. Diana wrote it shortly before her death. I've never read it, never opened it, but it's addressed to you. I think she wanted you to have it eventually, and I've been waiting for the right time. William stopped in his tracks, his hand frozen on the door handle. A letter from his mother, unread for over 25 years, kept secret by the woman who had caused her so much pain. The irony was almost too much to bear. He turned slowly, his eyes searching Camilla's face for any sign of deception. Where is it? In a safety deposit box at my bank, Camilla answered. I can have it retrieved today if you wish. Why? William asked, his voice rough with emotion. Why keep it from me all these years? Because I didn't know what it said, Camilla replied honestly. And because I was afraid. Afraid it would destroy whatever fragile peace we'd managed to build? Afraid it would hurt your father. Afraid of what truths it might contain. But you're right to confront all of this now. Some secrets have been buried too long. William nodded slowly, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. A letter from his mother, waiting all these years. What could she have wanted to tell him? What final words had she left behind? The morning's discoveries had already shaken him to his core. But this revelation felt like the ground itself was crumbling beneath his feet. He walked out of Clarence House, knowing that nothing would ever be quite the same. The confrontation had opened doors that had been sealed for decades, and whatever lay behind them would change the royal family forever. The private meeting room at Kensington Palace was filled with an unusual collection of people. Prince William sat at the head of the table, flanked by Detective Chief Inspector Rothwell and 3 senior members of the Royal Protection Command. Across from them sat Marcus Webb, the private investigator Camilla had hired, looking decidedly uncomfortable in such official company. At the far end of the table, somewhat isolated from the rest, sat Camilla herself. Her usual confidence notably absent. William had spent the previous evening reading through everything in excruciating detail. He had barely slept, his mind racing with possibilities and implications. Catherine had found him at 3 in the morning, still poring over documents in his study, and had gently suggested that he needed rest. But how could he rest when every page revealed new questions about who he could trust and what had really been happening within his own family? Let's begin, William said, his voice carrying the weight of authority that came with being heir to the throne. Mr. Webb, I'd like you to walk us through your investigation from the beginning. Leave nothing out. Marcus Webb was in his late 50s, with the weathered look of someone who had seen too much in his career. His gray eyes were sharp, despite his casual demeanor, and when he spoke, was with the measured precision of someone trained to gather and analyze intelligence. 6 months ago, Queen Camilla contacted me through a secure channel. She showed me several photographs that had been delivered to her office anonymously. The images showed members of the immediate royal family in locations that should have been secure. Did you verify that the photographs were genuine? Rothwell asked, his pen poised over his notepad. First thing I did, Webb confirmed. I have contacts who specialize in digital forensics. The images weren't doctored or manipulated. They were genuine photographs taken with professional equipment, likely a telephoto lens with stabilization capabilities. The angles and quality suggested someone with photography training and access to high-end gear. William leaned forward. What made you think this was an inside job rather than just aggressive paparazzi? Several factors, Webb replied, pulling out a tablet and bringing up a series of images. First, the locations. Some of these shots were taken from positions that would be impossible for anyone outside palace grounds to access. Second, the timing. Several photographs captured moments that weren't on any public schedule. Someone knew where the family would be and when. Third, the consistency. This wasn't random, opportunistic photography. This was systematic documentation. Camilla spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. That's when I realized we might have a security breach from within. I asked Marcus to identify potential suspects without alerting anyone who might be involved. Rothwell looked skeptical. With respect, Your Majesty, that decision circumvented established protocols and may have compromised the official investigation we could have conducted. I'm aware of that now, Camilla acknowledged. At the time, I thought I was protecting the family from unnecessary alarm and potential leaks to the media. I made a judgment call, and in retrospect, it may have been the wrong one. William appreciated her directness, but remained focused on the facts. Mr. Webb, you mentioned 3 suspects. Tell us about them. Webb nodded and pulled up 3 personnel files on his tablet. The first is Thomas Garrett, 42, former military photographer who now works in the Royal Communications Office. He has access to family schedules, knows security protocols, and has the technical skills to take professional quality photographs. His financial records show some unusual cash deposits over the past year that don't align with his salary. How much money are we talking about? William asked. Approximately £30,000 in total, deposited in increments ranging from 2 to 5,000. Always cash, always deposited at different branches of his bank. Classic pattern for someone trying to hide the source of additional income. William made a mental note of the name. Thomas Garrett. He tried to recall if he had ever met the man personally. The communications office had dozens of employees, and he couldn't remember every face. Who's the second suspect? Jennifer Morrison, 36, works in Palace Security Coordination. She's responsible for mapping out secure routes and clearance zones for family movements. She would know exactly where cameras and guards are positioned, which means she'd also know the blind spots. What's her motive? Rothwell asked. Financial troubles, Webb explained. She's gone through a difficult divorce, has 2 children to support, and her ex-husband isn't paying child support. She's filed for bankruptcy protection twice in the last 3 years. Someone in desperate financial straits with access to valuable information is always a person of interest. William felt a pang of sympathy for the woman despite the circumstances. Financial desperation drove good people to make terrible choices. But sympathy couldn't override security concerns, especially where his children were involved. And the third suspect? Webb hesitated before answering, and William noticed the brief glance he exchanged with Camilla. Something about this third suspect made them both uncomfortable. The third suspect is Edward Pembroke, 58, senior advisor to the King's private secretary. He's been with the royal household for over 30 years and has access to virtually everything. Schedules, security plans, personal correspondence, financial records. If someone wanted comprehensive intelligence on the royal family, he'd be in the perfect position to provide it. The room fell silent. A senior advisor with 3 decades of service being suspected of betrayal was serious business. This wasn't just a security breach. This would be a fundamental violation of trust at the highest levels of the household. William felt his stomach tighten. What evidence do you have against Pembroke? Circumstantial, but compelling, Webb said. He's been making frequent trips to a private residence in Kent that doesn't match his stated financial situation. The property is worth over £2 million. But his official salary and disclosed assets wouldn't support that kind of investment. He also has a pattern of being present at locations just before photographs are taken. Could be coincidence, but it's worth investigating. Detective Rothwell was taking notes rapidly. This is serious intelligence that should have been reported through official channels immediately. We're talking about potential treason, breach of official secrets, and criminal invasion of privacy. Which is exactly why I wanted to be certain before making accusations, Camilla interjected. Edward Pembroke has served this family faithfully for 3 decades. Accusing him without solid proof could destroy his life and reputation if we're wrong. And protecting him could endanger my children if we're right, William countered sharply. I understand the desire to protect long-serving staff, but my priorities are very clear here. One of the senior protection officers, Commander Patricia Hayes, spoke up for the first time. Your Royal Highness, with your permission, I'd like to place all 3 suspects under immediate surveillance. We can also conduct forensic audits of their communications and financial records. Do it, William agreed, without hesitation. But discreetly. If whoever is behind this realizes we're closing in, they might destroy evidence or disappear entirely. Webb cleared his throat. There's another complication. The photographs that were sent to Queen Camilla weren't the only copies. Whoever's behind this has been selective about what they've released or kept. That suggests they're building a collection for a specific purpose, not just selling to tabloids for quick money. What kind of purpose? William asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Blackmail, Webb said simply. Or leverage. Having detailed documentation of the royal family's private lives, knowing their routines. Capturing them in vulnerable moments, that's valuable ammunition for someone wanting to exert influence or extract concessions. The implications were staggering. Someone within the household wasn't just invading privacy or making money from photography. They were potentially building a dossier that could be used to manipulate or damage the monarchy itself. William thought about his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, and how she had navigated similar crises with dignity and strategic thinking. What would she have done in this situation? We need to consider the endgame, William said thoughtfully. If this is about blackmail or leverage, then whoever is behind it hasn't made their move yet. They're still collecting, still building their position. That gives us time, but it also means they're waiting for something. What would make someone sit on this kind of material rather than use it immediately? Commander Hayes leaned forward. They could be waiting for a specific event. A coronation, a wedding, a state visit. Something where the threat of exposure would cause maximum damage or give them maximum leverage. Or they could be waiting for payment from someone else, Rothwell added. Perhaps they're gathering intelligence for a foreign actor or media. Organization willing to pay a substantial sum for comprehensive access. Camilla, who had been quietly listening, spoke again. There's another possibility we haven't considered. What if this isn't about the current generation at all? What if this is connected to the old photographs, the ones of Diana? Someone who has an agenda related to the past rather than the present. William turned to look at her directly. Explain what you mean. Those photographs of your mother were taken during the worst period of her life. Someone wanted them documented, wanted evidence of her struggles preserved. Maybe whoever gave them to me years ago has resurfaced. Maybe this is a continuation of something that started decades ago and we're only now seeing the full scope of it. The theory was unsettling because it made a certain kind of sense. The royal family had enemies, people who had been hurt or felt betrayed by the institution. Some of those grudges went back decades, festering and growing more elaborate over time. If someone had been documenting the family's private pain for 30 years, building a comprehensive record of their vulnerabilities that represented a threat unlike anything they had faced before, Webb pulled up another set of images on his tablet. I've been mapping out the timeline of when these photographs were taken and comparing them to staff schedules and security rotations. There's a pattern emerging. Most of the images were captured during shift changes, or when temporary security personnel were filling in for regular staff. That level of operational knowledge suggests military or intelligence training. Garrett is former military, Rothwell noted. That fits, but Pembroke served in military intelligence before joining the household, Webb countered. And Morrison's ex-husband was in the special forces. She would have been exposed to that world through him. Any of them could have the necessary background. William stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where his children often played. He thought about Charlotte laughing as she chased her brothers. About Louis's innocent questions about why they couldn't play in certain areas. About George's growing awareness that his life was different from other children's lives. They deserved to feel safe in their own home. They deserved privacy and normalcy, even if such things were increasingly difficult to provide in the modern world. I want daily briefings on the surveillance of all 3 suspects, William said, turning back to face the room. I want every piece of evidence documented and verified. And I want to know the moment you have anything concrete that would hold up in court. This investigation stays contained to this room. No one else in the household gets informed until we know who we can trust. What about the king? Camilla asked quietly. Charles needs to know what's happening. William met her eyes, seeing genuine concern there. Whatever else he might think about their complicated history, he recognized that she truly cared about his father. I'll tell him tonight. In private, he deserves to hear it from me, and he deserves to know everything, including the letter you mentioned. I've already contacted the bank, Camilla said. The letter will be delivered to you tomorrow morning. William, whatever it says, whatever your mother wanted you to know, I hope it brings you some peace. She loved you more than anything in this world. For a moment, the professional atmosphere of the meeting cracked, and something more personal emerged. William nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The wounds from his mother's death had never fully healed, and the prospect of reading her words after all these years brought emotions. Rushing back that he had carefully controlled for decades, the meeting continued for another hour, with each person assigned specific tasks and responsibilities. Commander Hayes would oversee the surveillance operations. Rothwell would coordinate with the Metropolitan Police's specialist units. Webb would continue his investigation, while now working officially with the Protection Command. And William would carry the burden of knowing that someone close to his family, someone they trusted, was betraying them in the most invasive way possible. As the meeting broke up and people filed out of the room, William remained seated, staring at the photographs spread across the table. Images of his family, stolen moments of their private lives, evidence of a threat that came from within rather than without. He thought about the trust his grandmother had placed in her staff, the way the household functioned on loyalty and discretion. Someone had violated that sacred trust, and the damage would ripple through the institution for years to come. Camilla approached him as the last of the security personnel left the room. William, I know I can't undo the pain I caused your mother. I know I'll always be the villain in that story, and perhaps I deserve to be. But I want you to know that everything I've done in this situation has been motivated by a genuine desire to protect this family, to protect you and your children. Whatever you find in that letter tomorrow, whatever judgment you ultimately make about my actions, please believe that. William looked at her, this complicated woman who had caused so much pain yet had somehow become integral to his father's happiness. I believe you were trying to do the right thing. I don't agree with how you went about it, but I believe your intentions were good. That's something, at least. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't absolution. But it was acknowledgement, and in the complex web of royal family relationships. Sometimes that was the best anyone could hope for. Camilla nodded, and left him alone with his thoughts, and the evidence of betrayal spread out. Before him, like a map of violated trust. Tomorrow would bring his mother's letter and whatever truths it contained. Tonight he had to tell his father that someone in their household was documenting their lives for purposes unknown, and that the safety they had all taken for granted was an illusion that had been shattered. The letter arrived at Kensington Palace at precisely 8 o'clock in the morning, delivered by special courier under the watchful eye of 2 protection officers. William had barely slept again, and Catherine had stayed close by his side, offering silent support as he wrestled with anticipation and dread in equal measure. The envelope was weathered but intact, his name written in his mother's distinctive handwriting across the front. Just seeing those familiar loops and curves made his breath catch in his throat. Catherine squeezed his hand. Do you want me to stay, or would you rather read it alone? William considered the question. Part of him wanted the privacy to process whatever emotions the letter might trigger. But another part recognized that he had spent too many years compartmentalizing his grief, hiding his pain behind the walls of royal duty. Stay, he said quietly. Please stay. He opened the envelope carefully, as if it were a precious artifact that might crumble at rough handling. Inside was a single sheet of Diana's personal stationery, dated August 1997, just weeks before her death. The words were written in blue ink, and here and there. William could see where the pen had pressed harder, where emotion had made his mother's hand less steady. My dearest William, the letter began. If you are reading this, then I am gone. And you are old enough to understand things I could never explain when you were young. I have asked that this letter be kept until you reach an age where you can read it with the wisdom of experience rather than the confusion of youth.
William's eyes blurred with tears.
But he blinked them away and continued reading. Catherine remained perfectly still beside him, her hand still holding his. I want you to know that everything I did, every choice I made, was driven by love for you and Harry. The marriage to your father was complicated in ways that the public will never fully understand. Camilla was part of that complication, yes, but she was not the only reason things fell apart. Your father and I were never truly compatible, despite the fairy tale the world wanted to see. We were two different, wanted different things, carried different wounds from our own childhoods. William paused, absorbing his mother's words. The media narrative had always been so simple. Charles had loved Camilla, had betrayed Diana, had destroyed the marriage, but his mother's letter was offering a more nuanced truth, one that acknowledged the complexity of human relationships and the ways that incompatibility could doom even the best intentions. I do not write this to excuse anyone's behavior, including my own. I made mistakes. I was manipulative at times, driven by pain and jealousy to do things I regret. But I want you to understand that Camilla is not a monster, though I often painted her as one. She is simply a woman who loved your father, as I once tried to. The tragedy is that he loved her back, and no amount of duty or public pressure could change that fundamental fact. William felt Catherine shift beside him, perhaps surprised by the letter's tone. Diana had always been portrayed as the wronged party, the innocent victim of her husband's affair. To hear her acknowledge her own role in the marriage's failure, to hear her speak with some understanding about Camilla, was unexpected by the time you read this. I hope you will have learned that people are rarely purely good or purely evil. They are complicated, contradictory, capable of both great kindness and terrible cruelty, sometimes within the same moment. Your father loved me in his way, even if it was not the way I needed. And I loved him in mine, even when that love became twisted by disappointment and betrayal. The letter continued, and William read about his mother's hopes for him, her fears about the institution he would one day inherit, her dreams that he would find real love and happiness, rather than the arranged compatibility that had defined her own marriage. She wrote about the pressures of royal life, the suffocating protocols, the way every private moment became public property. She warned him to guard his heart and his children, to fight for their right to humanity within the confines of duty. Then, near the end, Diana's letter took a turn that made William's breath stop entirely. There is something you need to know, something I have learned only recently. There are people who have been documenting our family for years, collecting information, taking photographs, building a record of our most private moments. I do not know who they are or what they ultimately want, but I have become aware that someone within the household, someone we trust, is betraying that trust for purposes I do not understand. I have given evidence of this to someone I believe can keep it safe until the truth can be revealed at the right time. If anything happens to me, William, I need you to find that evidence and expose whoever is behind this violation. Our family deserves better than to be prey for those who would exploit our pain. William's hands trembled as he read those words again. Trying to process what his mother was telling him across the span of 27 years, she had known. She had discovered the surveillance, had tried to preserve evidence, had wanted him to eventually uncover the truth, and she had given that evidence to someone. To Camilla. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She knew, William said aloud, his voice rough. She knew someone was documenting the family, and she gave the evidence to Camilla to keep safe. Catherine leaned closer to read the passage herself. That changes everything, doesn't it? If Diana trusted Camilla with this information, if she wanted you to eventually receive it, it means Camilla was telling the truth about how she got those photographs, William finished. It means my mother, despite everything between them, believed Camilla would protect this evidence until I was ready to use it. The letter concluded with expressions of love, hopes for his future, and a final request. When the time comes to confront this betrayal, be stronger than I was. Do not let anger or hurt drive your decisions. Be strategic, be wise, and be merciful where mercy is deserved. Some people betray because they are cruel, but others betray because they are weak or desperate. Know the difference. I love you always in this life and whatever comes after. Your devoted mother, Diana. William set the letter down carefully on the table, his mind racing. Everything he had believed about the situation had just shifted. The evidence in Camilla's car wasn't her collection of surveillance material. It was his mother's evidence, preserved for decades, waiting for him to be ready to act on it. The recent photographs that had been added to the collection were part of the same pattern Diana had discovered in the 90s. Someone was still documenting the family. Still collecting information for reasons that remained unclear, his phone buzzed with a message from Commander Hayes. Development in surveillance. Need immediate meeting. William looked at Catherine, showed her the message, and saw his own determination reflected in her eyes. We end this today, he said. The emergency meeting convened in the secure conference room within an hour. Everyone from the previous day's meeting was there, plus several additional security specialists. Commander Hayes stood at the head of the table looking grimly satisfied. We have him, she announced without preamble. Thomas Garrett made contact with a known tabloid journalist this morning. Our surveillance team observed him transferring a USB drive during what appeared to be a casual encounter at a coffee shop. We intercepted the journalist before he could leave the area and secured the drive. What was on it? William asked. 372 photographs spanning the last 8 months. Images of you, Princess Catherine, your children, the king, and various other family members. All taken from angles and locations that confirm inside access. The metadata shows they were all taken with equipment registered to the Royal Communications Office, Detective Rothwell added. We also found evidence of direct communication between Garrett and several media outlets negotiating prices for the images. He was in the middle of brokering a deal worth over £200,000 for exclusive access to his complete collection. William felt rage surge through him but forced himself to remain controlled. Have you arrested him? He's being detained as we speak, Rothwell confirmed. We're executing search warrants on his home and office. The charges will include breach of official secrets, invasion of privacy, and potentially treason depending on what else we find. What about the other 2 suspects? William asked. Commander Hayes shook her head. Jennifer Morrison and Edward Pembroke are clean. Their financial situations and behavior patterns are concerning, but not criminal. Morrison's deposits came from a second job she had been working at night. She was too embarrassed to report it because of the strict employment guidelines for security personnel. Pembroke's property in Kent was inherited from his late wife's family. We verified everything. Webb, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Garrett fits the profile perfectly. Former military photography training, access to schedules and secure areas, and most importantly, he was on staff during the 90s. He could have been the source of the original photographs of Princess Diana. The pieces were falling into place. Someone had been watching the family for nearly 30 years. First documenting Diana's pain, then continuing to surveil the next generation. The thought of this man having such intimate access to their lives for so long made William feel physically ill. I want to question him myself, William said. Your Royal Highness, that's highly irregular, Rothwell began. But William cut him off. This man has been documenting my family since I was a child. He photographed my mother during her darkest hours. He has images of my children that should never have existed. I have the right to face him and understand why. There was a brief silence as the security professionals exchanged glances. Finally, Commander Hayes nodded. We can arrange a supervised interview. But he has legal representation, and anything he says will need to be documented for court proceedings. 2 hours later, William found himself in a sterile interview room at a metropolitan police facility. Thomas Garrett sat across the table from him, looking smaller and more ordinary than William had imagined. He was a balding man with unremarkable features, the kind of person who could blend into any crowd. His eyes, however, held a calculating intelligence that made William's skin crawl. Why? William asked simply. Why spend 30 years documenting my family's private moments? What could possibly motivate that kind of sustained invasion? Garrett was silent for a long moment, then smiled slightly. You really don't understand, do you? You live in palaces. You have every privilege imaginable, and you still think you're entitled to privacy too. The British people pay for your lifestyle. They deserve to know who you really are, not the manufactured image your handlers present. So this was about accountability? William asked skeptically. You violated our privacy, photographed children without consent, documented private grief and pain, all in the name of transparency? I did it because someone needs to, Garrett replied. Your family operates in secrecy, makes decisions that affect millions, and hides behind protocol and tradition when questioned. Someone needed to keep a record of who you really are. What you do when you think no one is watching. The truth about the House of Windsor. You photographed my mother crying, William said, his voice dangerously quiet. You documented her pain during the worst period of her life. Was that about truth? Or was it about exploitation? For the first time, Garrett's confidence faltered slightly. Princess Diana was the one who figured out what I was doing. She confronted me in '97, threatened to have me arrested. I thought my operation was over. But then she made me an offer. William felt his heart rate accelerate. Of offer? She said if I gave her copies of everything I had collected, if I let her preserve the evidence of how the family really operated behind closed doors, she wouldn't report me. She wanted proof. Documentation of how the institution treated her, how they controlled every aspect of her life. She thought someday it might be needed, might help someone understand what really happened. The revelation aligned with what Diana had written in her letter. She had discovered Garrett's surveillance and had turned it to her advantage, collecting evidence of the family's dysfunction and secrets. So, you made a deal with her, William said. I gave her copies of everything, Garrett confirmed, and I stopped photographing her specifically. That was the agreement, but I continued documenting the rest of the family. After she died, I waited to see if anyone would discover what I had given her. When no one did, I realized she must have hidden it. Must have given it to someone she trusted to eventually reveal the truth. She gave it to Camilla, William said. My mother gave evidence of your surveillance to the woman she considered her greatest enemy. Do you know why? Because she believed Camilla would protect it until I was ready to handle it properly. Believed that despite everything, Camilla could be trusted with something that important. Garrett looked genuinely surprised. Queen Camilla had the evidence all these years. I always wondered where it had gone. And you just kept documenting, William said with disgust. Kept invading privacy, kept building your collection of stolen moments. Were you going to continue forever? I was going to release everything when you became king, Garrett said. A complete record of the Windsor family's private reality across 30 years. I was building something unprecedented, a true historical. The document of how royalty actually lives, not the sanitized version they want people to see. You were building blackmail material, William corrected. You were stealing our lives to sell to the highest bidder. Don't dress it up as historical documentation when we both know you were negotiating with tabloids for hundreds of thousands of pounds. Garrett shrugged. A man has to survive. The historical significance doesn't pay the bills. The images have both scholarly and commercial value. I was willing to explore both markets. William stood, unable to stomach any more of the man's rationalizations. You stole 30 years of our lives. You documented my mother's pain and my children's innocence for your own benefit. Whatever you tell yourself about truth or accountability, you're just a thief who happened to have a camera. As William left the interview room, he felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. They had caught the person responsible, had stopped the surveillance, had recovered the evidence before it could be sold or released. But nothing could undo the violation. Couldn't erase the years of having their most private moments documented by someone they had trusted. The betrayal would echo through the household for years to come, making everyone more suspicious, more guarded, more isolated. That evening, William returned to Clarence House to speak with Camilla. She received him in the same morning room where their initial confrontation had occurred, but the atmosphere was entirely different now. She looked tired but relieved when he showed her Diana's letter. As she read his mother's words, tears filled her eyes. She was an extraordinary woman, Camilla said softly. Even when we were enemies, even when every instinct told her to hate me, she found a way to trust me with something this important. I've tried to honor that trust by protecting this evidence, by investigating when I saw the pattern continuing. I know I made mistakes in how I handled it, but I hope you can understand why. William sat down across from her, feeling the weight of decades of complicated history. My mother wrote that people are rarely purely good or purely evil, that they're complicated and contradictory. I think she was trying to tell me something about you, about my father, about herself. She wanted me to see past the simple narratives, to understand that the truth is always more complex. What will you do with Garrett's collection? Camilla asked. The evidence from all these years. Destroy most of it, William said without hesitation. Some will be kept for legal proceedings, but the rest will be destroyed. Images, my mother's pain, the private moments of our family, none of that deserves to exist as entertainment or historical curiosity. We're entitled to some privacy, some dignity, even if we live public lives. Camilla nodded in agreement. And the old photographs? The ones Diana gave me? Those too? William said. My mother wanted me to have evidence of the truth, and now I do. I've seen them. I understand what she wanted me to know, and now they can be destroyed as well. Some truths don't need to be preserved forever. They sat in silence for a moment, two people connected by complicated family bonds and shared pain. Finally, William spoke again. I can't forget what you did to my mother. That history will always exist between us. But I can recognize that you've tried, in your way, to make amends. You protected evidence she trusted you with. You investigated threats to my children. You've stood by my father through everything. Counts for something. Thank you, Camilla said simply. That means more than you know. William stood to leave, then paused. She wrote that some people betray because they're cruel, and others because they're weak or desperate. She wanted me to know the difference, and to be merciful where mercy is deserved. I think she was trying to teach me something about forgiveness, about recognizing that people can change and grow. I'm not sure I'm there yet, but I'm trying. As William drove back to Kensington Palace, he thought about his mother's letter, about Garrett's arrest, about Camilla's complicated position within the family, about everything that had been revealed in these intense few days. The investigation had uncovered a 30-year conspiracy that had documented his family's most private moments. But it had also revealed unexpected truths about trust, forgiveness, and the complexity of human relationships. Catherine was waiting for him when he arrived home. Without words, she wrapped her arms around him, offering the comfort of her presence. Later, after checking on their sleeping children, William sat in his study and wrote a detailed memo to his father, explaining everything that had happened. King Charles deserved to know the full truth about Garrett, about the surveillance, about Diana's letter, and about Camilla's role in protecting evidence all these years. The memo concluded with a recommendation that palace security protocols be completely overhauled, that staff vetting procedures be strengthened, and that the family take active steps to protect their privacy in an age where technology made surveillance easier than ever before. But William also included something else, a suggestion that Camilla's efforts, however imperfectly executed, had come from a place of genuine concern for the family's well-being. It wasn't absolution, but it was acknowledgement. 3 days later, the story broke in the news media. The palace issued a carefully worded statement, confirming that a former employee had been arrested for unauthorized photography in breach of official secrets. Details were limited, but the message was clear. The royal family took their security seriously, and violations would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Thomas Garrett would face trial, and his collected evidence would never see publication. In the months that followed, William found himself thinking often about his mother's letter and the wisdom she had tried to impart. People were complicated. Forgiveness was difficult, but sometimes necessary. The truth was rarely simple. And family, despite all its complications and painful history, was worth fighting for and protecting. He never forgot the surveillance, never fully let down his guard, and made sure his children understood the importance of privacy and security. But he also tried to live by his mother's final request, to be strategic, wise, and merciful where mercy was deserved. It was a balance he would spend the rest of his life trying to maintain, navigating between duty and humanity, between justice and compassion, between protecting his family's privacy and acknowledging their public role. The confrontation with Camilla had opened old wounds, but it had also created an unexpected opportunity for understanding. They would never be close, would never overcome the history that stood between them. But they had found a way to coexist with mutual respect. united in their commitment to protecting the family they both, in their different ways, loved. And sometimes William reflected that was enough. Not perfect, not ideal, but human, complicated, contradictory, and real.